We stand here today once again as a community to bear witness for the lost and for the living, to assume our solemn obligation to tell the stories, to share the history, to remember the atrocities of the Holocaust and the people who faced those atrocities, one of the darkest chapters of human history. The magnitude of the loss is so overwhelming, it's nearly impossible to comprehend. The 6 million Jews murdered by the Nazis in the Holocaust between 1933 and 1945 is roughly equivalent to every single person living in the state of Maryland. Think about that for a minute. Now consider if we held a moment and a minute of silence for each of those 6 million Jewish victims, we would be standing here in this chamber in that deafening silence for over 11 years. For their memories to be a blessing, we must remember their names and continue to share their stories. As time goes on and as survivors advance in age, we must record their stories to have them for perpetuity. We must teach our children so that they can pass it on to their children. Today, we are so deeply humbled to be joined by Lou Pohorilis, a survivor who we will hear from shortly, who's joined by his son, Steve. We are once again honored by the presence of Manny Mandel, a member of our extended council family, father of Lisa Mandel-Trupp, who has previously shared his stories as a young boy in the Shoah. We're also joined by Robert Lubrin and Zach Trupp and members of the 2G and 3G boards. The lives of these survivors is an extraordinary act of defiance against evil. Each and every day of their lives, of their children and their grandchildren's lives, is a remarkable rebellion against unthinkable oppression. We're also joined by the Jewish Community Relations Council, Deb Miller, Janice Rosenblatt, and the Montgomery County Jewish Educators Alliance, Andrew Winter, and Dr. Mark Cohen. As we remember those who perished and honor those who survived, we stand together in solidarity as a community to condemn anti-Semitism in all of its forms, to combat hatred, and to repudiate genocide against anyone, anywhere, and to band together to fight the disease of indifference and say together, as a community, never again.
Thank you for inviting us to witness your issuing the proclamation commemorating Yom HaShoah. You'll have to excuse me, sometimes my voice breaks with the memories. I also want to thank you, Council, for your leadership in providing refuge to immigrants that this country badly needs in its workforce, and your work in combating xenophobia and anti-Semitism. I was born in Lvov, Poland, no Lviv, Ukraine. I came to the United States in 1947 as an undocumented, illiterate, 10-year-old Polish-speaking orphan who did not know the alphabet or simple numbers. When I was about 5 or 6, and Germany entered Lvov, my father found separate hiding places for me, for himself, my mother, and other members of the family. He subsequently removed me from where I was hidden and placed me with a saintly Polish woman whose name was Anna Boska, who was a deeply devout Catholic. I had to remember that my false Polish name was Zbyszek Jabłonski. She and I traveled through the countryside to a small Polish farm village where she had relatives. It was there that I witnessed the deeply traumatic horrors of xenophobia and ethnic cleansing. Many mornings, a horse-drawn wagon would go to a nearby, very small Polish farm and bring back the bodies of women, men, and children slaughtered during the night by Ukrainians for burial in a churchyard. To this day, I am equally as haunted by those sights as I am by the times that I spent hiding in Lvov. Before that, in Lvov, I had lived in a crowded attic, endured hunger, and that's my most vivid recollection, hernia surgery without anesthesia, lice, and fear of discovery. Sometimes, I guess in early 1943, Anna Bosco was shipped by rail cattle car for slave labor in Germany and brought me with her. She was made to work as a cook on a large German farm. I lived there with her. She later had to work at a Krupp munitions factory, though we still lived on a farm. Then German soldiers and tanks moved onto the farm, and after a time we hid in a cellar while we listened to the noise of war. Excuse me. One morning we came out of the cellar to see dozens of field graves consisting of dirt and rocks covering the bodies of fallen soldiers. After that trauma, Anna Bosco and I were, excuse me, that's why I don't do this often, I break. Overjoyed, not only were we free, but the conquering troops accompanying the Brits were Polish paratroopers. And after all, I consider myself a Polish boy. We were transferred to a DP camp in that region and lived there for several years. To shorten a long story, my father's brother, my Uncle Oscar, found and reclaimed me in 1947. I was 10 years old, and brought me to New York with a transit visa for the ultimate destination of the Dominican Republic. Who knows, had I continued on to the Dominican Republic, I might have become a baseball player. Through a private law passed by Congress, I was permitted to stay in the United States. I ultimately learned that the Holocaust brutally claimed my parents and almost all of my relatives. Among those killed were my grandparents on both sides, their many siblings, 3 of my father's brothers and their families, my mother's 2 brothers, many cousins, and other members of an extended family. Each of those lost lives had a story of brutal treatment and execution by various means, either by Germans or their Ukrainian Nazi collaborators. Because I was illiterate when I came to New York, I was placed in a boarding Jewish day school, taught Judaism, and graduated from the 8th grade with the American Legion Medal awarded for scholarship to one 8th grader. I supported myself by waiting on tables in the Catskill Mountains while I was attending high school and college in New York. I came to Washington for law school, worked as a lawyer, founded a law firm, and am retired from a successor of that firm. Also in the 1960s, I became very active in Prince George's and Maryland Democratic politics, held a number of offices in various political parties and governmental agencies. I moved to Montgomery County 40 years ago. I've been married to my wife Libby for 62 years. We have 3 children, one of whom Steve is here. My daughter Sharon is today, probably right now, talking about my life to 1,000 students at Choate School. And my wife Libby and I have been married now 62 years. Thank you.